has dominion and authority and majesty before now, before all time, and now and forever. That's why it says, now to him who is able. The point of the Bible has one major point to it. Okay? The main point of the Bible is to communicate the idea that God is here to redeem creation. The point of every river, right, is to run to the sea. Correct? Every river, that's its main point, is to run to the sea. And all of the widenings and narrowings and bends and loops and falls, those are all immaterial to the major point, which is that it's moving its way to the sea. Well, the main point of God's history, the main point after the fall in the garden, is to redeem mankind. That's the main point. And all of the widenings and narrowings and bends and falls, all these problems are not to that point. They're important, but they're an aside. And so, I guess the first instruction I get from a benediction is that regardless of the problems that you have in your life today, and every culture has its own demons to exercise, every period of time has its own battles to fight. We don't have to wage war against slavery anymore in this country, but we have other things we have to fight. You get the idea. Every era, the church has something that it needs to stand up against and defeat and work on. Every family has something to work on. Every individual does. All I'm saying is the problems are largely parenthetical to the major point, which is that God is sovereign. He has majesty. He has dominion. He is to be glorified yesterday, today, and forever. And that his will is going to be accomplished. That's the main point. And that we're not to fret or not to be shipwrecked by our individual problems, okay, and by the things that are going on in our lives. So that's the first point I get from this passage, is that all problems are parenthetical. It's not that they're not important, but you need to understand that the main point is not your problems, but the main point is God and his will and his redemption of creation. The second point I want you to see here is that all poverty is a preference. All the poverty in our life is there because we prefer it. Look at verse 24. Now to him who is able to keep you from stumbling and to make you stand in the presence of his glory blameless with great joy. Incidentally, those are three things that are very hard to accomplish. Think about that. God is able to keep you from stumbling, which means he's able to keep you from sinning. He's also capable of bringing you into the presence of God blameless, so that God will see you and see none of your sin. And lastly, that you'll be able to do all of that with great joy. Joy is a very hard thing to come by in our lives in today. Okay? It is grossly incorrect. This is real important to know. Okay? It's grossly incorrect to say that God can do anything. Okay? Because he can't. Anybody ever told you that? God can do anything? I understand where that's coming from, but that's a grossly incorrect statement, because he cannot do anything. There are, in fact, many, 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 many things which God is incapable of doing. For instance, God cannot lie. He cannot act unjustly. He cannot be unfaithful. He cannot glorify another. He cannot tolerate sin, etc., etc., etc. So there are a myriad of things that God is unable to do. And almost without fail, what God is unable to do, Satan is able to do. So the things that God is unable to do, Satan can do. Satan can lie. He can act unjustly. He can be unfaithful. He can tempt us to sin. He can do all manner of things that God is not capable. And there's the peril for our soul, right? Because here you have two entities for which we can serve, God or Satan. And it's very difficult to serve somebody who cannot give you what you want. And if what you want is something Satan is able to provide, it's just almost natural that you'll serve him instead. For who would want to serve somebody for nothing? And so that's where all of our souls find themselves in peril. Do you want what God is able to provide? Do you want holiness? Do you want fellowship with God? And do you want purity of heart? Suppose you don't want to be holy. And suppose God's not somebody you want to fellowship with. And suppose you don't even care about, maybe you want your heart to be dark. Why then would you care about God if that's what he wants to provide? You see the problem? But suppose you don't want him. Suppose you want to live a sensual, um, sinful, shipwrecked life, well then, Satan is there for you. Every bit of bitter honey and sour milk that the Israelites had in Canaan was the result of Israel's preference. One of the saddest stories, one of the saddest aspects of the account of Israel is that God, before Joshua took them over the Jordan to Jericho and beyond, God promised Israel complete victory. Remember that? He told them that He would give them that entire land. He promised them victory. But then He said, you're going to have to go and get it, though. You're going to have to go and claim it. You will not, there's nobody in Canaan that can defeat you, and there's no enemy in Canaan that can overcome you. It's all yours. But if you, I want to make sure it's something you want, and in order to have it, you've got to go fight for it. You've got to get your hands dirty and bloody in order to do it. Well, that's the big problem, is that it's the same in your own walk with the Lord. Your poverty of spirit, the things that you lack in your walk with the Lord, that's your own preference. Every single enemy that Israel allowed to remain in Canaan, and that was a thorn in their side, they wanted that group there because they just lacked the heart, they lacked the spit, they lacked the drive to root them out. And so they left all those things to remain, and it certainly was a trouble for them. But that ended up being their preference. And when you look at this, when it says that God is able to keep you from stumbling and to make you stand in the presence of His glory blameless and to have great joy. If you don't have joy, if you are stumbling, if you're not in fellowship with the Lord today, that's your preference. Do you understand that? You can't be like Flip Wilson and blame Satan for everything you're doing. The devil made me do it. That's not true. If you're living a miserable life, that's because you want it. If you don't know the Lord very well today, that's because that's what you want. If you're miserable without joy, that's what you want. Because God is able to give you all of those things. Do you understand that? I commiserate with you if you're having a hard time. I know what it's like. But you cannot blame circumstance for it. You cannot blame your own innate proclivities and so on and so forth. There's no excuse for it. God is able. So all poverty is a preference today. I think you know what I'm talking about. I've worked for a long time, not as much in the last few years, but I know a lot of the people in our city who work with homeless people. And I've taken youth group down and we've helped out miracle making ministries and so on and so forth. And when you talk to these people who deal with homelessness, and a lot of times I'll have people come to my office who are having trouble and they're homeless and they want help. The single greatest enemy, when you talk to these people who in our city who work with the homeless, they'll say the number one root cause of homelessness is apathy. That people just almost want to be homeless. There are plenty of means available to people who